Hello and welcome back to another episode of Politics Relaxed podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the latest measures brought in by the government and basically just a roundup of what's been happening. We've got a different host today, Lily. And we've also got Rajan and Cameron, and I'm Felix. So Lily, if you want to start us off.
Okay, so I thought the best thing to start on would be talking about the newest big measure brought in, so the tier system, so the 3 tiers, and right now London is in tier 2. So does anyone have any opinions on this? Like, do you think it's too harsh or too lenient?
Well, I think the tier system is not a good idea. I mean, Boris Johnson's own advisors said that it wasn't a good idea. That's what the reports from the media have been saying. I personally think a circuit breaker lockdown would do a lot better job than a tier system, and I just don't think local lockdowns will work. People don't take them seriously, I don't think. From what I've seen, like, people aren't taking the lockdown seriously in their local areas because they're like, oh, I'm on the edge, so I might as well not do it, or my friend, because they don't make sense, and it's too complicated even still. They need to simplify the measures so that people don't have to tune in at 5 o'clock every evening to find out what the latest measures are in their local areas. It doesn't work.
Okay, does anyone have any response to that? Because I personally think that the tier systems are not that bad. I think they're a better step in the right direction because they're much clearer than previous measures. So, Cameron?
Yeah, well, I think that the tier system that has been introduced it makes logical sense in that different regions are experiencing different rates of infections, and certain regions are suffering from a rise of cases much quicker than others. And I disagree with Felix on the point about circuit breaker lockdown. I think any form of national lockdown would be devastating for businesses, devastating for our economy. I just think we cannot do it. And to be honest, I think people have had enough of being told what to do. And people know I'm not exactly a libertarian. But I do believe that people's freedoms are being taken away to too far an extent now, and we need to step back and we need to look at the situation we're in, and we need to decide whether what we're doing, the course of action that we're taking, is necessarily the right course of action. Because in reality, this virus is going to be around until we get a vaccine, isn't it? And we've got to look at other ideas and other measures that we could introduce besides the lockdown to make sure that we're getting the proper balance correct between health, between the economy, between people's livelihoods, people's lives. And I don't think we're doing that enough at the moment.
I have to disagree because, look, the cases are rising. They're not going to stop rising. And if we look back in 2 weeks and we see that Wales and Northern Ireland and which have both got circuit breaker lockdowns, are doing in a lot better shape than us, the government will look back and be like, we made the wrong decision. And I don't want to be called Captain Hindsight, which the Tories like to throw around quite a lot, which is a bit hilarious considering their 18 U-turns. But look, we need a circuit breaker lockdown 2 weeks now and 2 weeks just before Christmas. It means that things can normalise again, and it will give us more time. Give us more time to act. And the tier system, I just don't think it will work. I do not think people will listen to the tier system.
So there are 2 things that I'd like to say. So firstly, I think that what the police are currently looking at right now, there is obviously a lot of confusion between everyone. People are going out, confused people. But police officers that spoke to the Home Affairs Select Committee, they're mostly focusing on clear breaches of the laws. For example, raves and massive group gatherings, rather than fining the confused public, because obviously there's a lot of confusion. But I think obviously the main thing that people have to avoid and have to provide unity together to stop this virus is stay at home and do not attend any large gatherings. That's what the police are looking at. But I'd just like to put a question to the floor. Anyone, all of you at your age, what do you see? How are people your age and older and younger respecting the lockdown rules?
Well, to be honest, I looked at it and I was like, well, I've been to school with these people, and if they have COVID, I probably have COVID, so why can I not go to their houses, and why can they not come to mine? It doesn't make sense. Because, at the minute, I was with my friends, like, last week, so it doesn't really make that much sense, to be honest. Especially when we've just got 1 week off. But we're still allowed 6 people outside, so I don't know. It's very hard to say, but from what I know, I think most people are sticking to the rules, but they're very skeptical, and speaking from experience, I just don't think they make sense.
How much respecting of social distancing do you get when you're gathering?
Yeah, I mean, that is, especially in school, it's just not going to happen, is it?
I mean, yeah, I see what you mean, especially in school, because everyone is absolutely just colluding together, just getting absolutely together, just getting in a move on. I think we've got sort of similar situation in Dubai where I am right now, but actually in school, social distancing is actually quite respected where I am. But obviously, if there's not in your case, then that's pretty sad, and that's what's gonna.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, from my societal observations, what I've noticed is I think that if these restrictions weren't here in place and they weren't being so clearly articulated in terms of the punishments that you might get, the fines, if you don't follow them, I honestly think that people would be showing a lot less attention. And just walking around, I went to a cafe today, and people are, going up to each other. They're still having normal conversations, but they're very careful, and they're saying, well, I shouldn't really be saying this because it's illegal, but I'm going to do it anyway. And this links into what I was saying before, which was we've got to try and look at other methods, because although people are following it to an extent, they understand some of the regulations, they understand the punishments that come with them. We've also got to try and make sure that the rules are working for people and not against them.
The next point I have on this is just a whole topic surrounding Christmas, and a lot of people have concerns about that. So what do you think we need to do to try and retain a degree of normality around Christmas, because it's a very important thing in a lot of people's lives in Britain? Okay, Felix.
Well, you say it's a lot important to a lot of people's lives, but I'd rather be saving lives than people having Christmas celebrations.
Well, I think it's obviously clear that we're going to have a very subpar Christmas, and we've got to kind of accept this already, because we know that all these restrictions are going to be in place. We're not going to be able to meet up with extended family or with friends. So what we've got to do is we've really got to try and plan for how we can still have a nice, happy Christmas, spending it with our close family and certain selected friends or groups. And we are, we're the British people, we're the British nation. We've got through far worse than a subpar Christmas, and I think we've just got to try and get through it. This is the approach to the whole pandemic, in my view, has got to be just got to try and get through until we get a vaccine. Just get through it, save as many lives as possible. And
yeah, I completely agree, and I think it kind of came across the wrong way, because this is a very minor issue in the grand scheme of things. So we're going to move on. Something ties in quite closely is financially. And what's happening in Manchester. So Felix, would you like to start?
Oh yeah, sure. So we had the financial statement from Rishi Sunak yesterday announcing lots of new financial measures for people in Tier 2 and the different tier systems. But I found it very contradictory, because just days ago we had this incident with the Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor, and they couldn't find an agreement. And I thought it was actually disgusting from the government. They offered, so he wanted 80 million at the start, but then he said, okay, I'll take 55 million. The government said 50 million. he never said anything, and then they just brought in the measures and gave them 30 million. Sorry, it was actually £7 per person in Manchester, which is not enough money to keep like people's livelihoods afloat. It's terrible from the government.
Well, on Manchester, I think this has been pretty badly handled by both sides. And I'm going to attack Andy Burnham simply because he has completely politicised this. He's been acting for much of the time. For example, when he came out of the building and then someone shows him on his phone the 30 million pound package that Manchester's been given, and then he pretends as though he didn't know, and it's a massive disaster. He knew about that. He had been told about that hours before, and I think what we're seeing here is Andy Burnham trying to raise his profile because he's had a few pretty low years since he was Secretary of Health over a decade ago. And I think actually what we've got to do is we do have to make sure that local regions like Manchester are getting sufficient support. And I think, to be honest, I do believe that the government have not done enough here. I think we should have given Manchester far more support than what they have. But what we also have to recognise is that the government have put in place plenty of schemes now. We heard just yesterday about the adjustments to the job support scheme, big adjustments, the plan for jobs, including the self-employed grants and the business grants. And we're talking also about massive increases in the capacity for universal credit. And I think the support is there for the vulnerable people that need it. And it is important that we keep Manchester vibrant. But as I said at the start, it's not been handled great by both sides. I mean, Andy Burnham has been handling this very poorly by not really working with the government on this. That I must oppose. But I also would say I oppose, the government's kind of lack of support that they provided to Manchester.
Oh, come on. Like, he's not been working against the government. They offered 50 million, he asked for 55. It was £5 million. And compared to what the government has spent on other things, they spent 75 million just on Wetherspoons. So, come on, £5 million compared to what the government's been chucking around everywhere is nothing. It was ridiculous from the government. They're getting petty over, in the grand scheme of things, not that much money.
Well, as I said, I said I don't think the government has given enough support to Manchester here. And I think, therefore, in fact, that it's been politicising from both sides, because this is, I think the government here are trying to cripple Burnham, which is, you could say, justified, but in the process they are trying to cripple Manchester, and I don't believe that's correct.
Yesterday, Marcus Rashford's child poverty scheme, which was a plan to make school dinners free, was put forward to the government, and 321 Conservative MPs voted against it, which means it won't be passed. So, Cameron, would you like to start to respond to this?
But just before that, if you want to find out more about the child food poverty vote that happened just a few days ago, then you can actually go to our website. It's a new thing we've started. It's going to have lots of different articles and all the links to our own videos. It's a great place just to find out more about politics. So if you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. Now we can get back to the episode.
So let's get past the opportunism of Labour, who are politicising this issue. Once again, I would say, let's look at the real facts and figures. I'm going to tell you it as it is. I'm going to tell you what you don't want to hear. 98% of children up and down this country are sufficiently provided for by their parents without government intervention. Yet under Labour's proposals yesterday for free meals and holidays, 93% of children in the UK would be eligible for these free lunches, which is incredibly inefficient, and looking at the figures, a complete waste of government money, because less than 2% of those eligible children actually need these free lunches. So over 11 million children who are already well provided for would be eligible to receive free lunches. Hundreds of millions of pounds down the drain at a time when every penny counts. And so there's a colossal financial flaw in these proposals. Instead of these absurd proposals, this government has brought in a more efficient, targeted approach we've given UK Council £63 million in total for emergency food and essential provision for the poorest and most vulnerable, which can be used for free school meals in the autumn half term. Alas, once again, Labour's absurd proposals have brought more attention away from this government's significant support. As I said, 63 million, it's a lot of money. For the poorest and most vulnerable in society. And I'm glad that this opportunism of astronomical magnitude has been quashed, and that we can now proceed to give this financial support to the people that need it the most.
Okay, Felix, would you like to respond to that?
Oh, come on, when every penny counts, £75 million to Wetherspoons, to save Wetherspoons. Come on, you're spending more on Wetherspoons than hungry children. People are jumping from paycheck to paycheck. And if they don't get that next paycheck, maybe more kids will be going hungry. But because of this government, they don't want to support that. They don't want to support feeding hungry children. How? It's absolutely disgusting.
Well, no, because that's not correct. Because as I said, the government has provided the £63 million in total for emergency food and essential provision up and down the country for the poorest and most vulnerable, including poor and vulnerable children. This is more targeted than the measure of giving 93% of children in the UK free lunches, even though only 2% would need it. This is more targeted. This is ensuring that we're spending our money wisely, that we are, we're not giving too much money away and to people who do not need it, and we're targeting it specifically to the poorest and most vulnerable. And the poorest and most vulnerable are those that are getting most out of it, therefore.
Nevertheless, whatever the statistics are, I mean, I personally got a statistic of under £20 million to end child food poverty, and it doesn't matter how many children, how many children we're paying for. We still have to provide for the 1.4 million disadvantaged children in England. And what we were proposing is it was £15 a week in food vouchers, and even if it was 20 million pounds to pay for it, even if it was Cameron's reported statistic of £63 million, it doesn't matter, because we had a more than £12 billion fee for a test and trace system that failed, a £500 million scheme for Eat Out to Help Out for the restaurants, right? So we can support our adults and we can support our wealthy adults, but we can't support our disadvantaged children. So much so that we have to get so many local businesses, local restaurants, local food banks, £16 million donated to the Newcastle Food Bank from, even though we're in a time of crisis, we are still having subsidised food in Parliament with over 80, when £3 million go to MPs, they get a £25 a day allowance for food. We can't give our 1.4 million disadvantaged children £15. We spend £3 million on MPs who get a salary of £81,000, and we can't support our disadvantaged children.
Right, let me jump in here, right? Because the 63 million from the government, what is the evidence that that is not enough? What is the evidence that that will not cover all of the vulnerable and poor people in the country? There is no evidence. There is no evidence because it hasn't been put into place yet. Okay? There's also no evidence that people are worse off now in terms of financially. There is little evidence that there's more support for people than ever before in this country's history, waiting for people. The JSS, Universal Credit, the grants, everything that this government has put in the last few months. I believe it is sufficient, frankly. I believe it is sufficient for people who are struggling. I'm not someone who's struggling, right? No one here is someone who's struggling, I believe. But I believe that this is going to be enough support for people that need it, for the poorest and vulnerable. And if you think not, there is no evidence for you to back that up with, because these schemes have not been in place long enough for you to be able to say that.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, okay, sure.
Thank you. So why are we going to wait for a study to go out when there could be kids hungry? Why don't we just skip that risk? Skip people being hungry for 3 months while we go and while we go on a study to find out if it's enough. We don't have that time. If there are hungry children, that's more important than whether that's enough money. I don't care if you're spending a bit more money. If there aren't children going hungry, it's better than nothing.
How much were Labour proposing to spend with these proposals yesterday?
120 million.
120 million.
You spent 75 million. We spent 75 million pounds on bloody on a chain of pubs. 75 million on a chain of pubs, but we won't feed like hungry children. We spent millions on the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. It's ridiculous. Why the Tories not helping out poor people?
But I go back to the point once again. 120 million pounds, and that is being spread across 93% of the UK's children, because 93% are eligible for free school meals. How is that amount being given to so many people a good idea, instead of spending 69 million, a smaller amount, but targeting it to the 2% that actually need it? How is there anything bad about that? How is there anything better about spending lots of excess money? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me how people can say that spending, 200 million pounds or so on a larger amount of people, but on 93% of Britain's children, is a better use of money than spending 63 million pounds, on the 2% of British children that actually need it. I mean, it's absurd to me, to be honest. And I think this comes right back to the point about politics, okay? And this is once again, Labour have pulled this out of the hat and said, oh yeah, we're going to support this. But in fact, if you look at the detail, this government has already done more to support the 2% than Labour will ever do.
Wasn't your 2% statistic? No. You know, right now your statistics, weren't they not based on that universal credit is only applicable to 2 children only? That's what the 63 million is for. That only 2 children per family. Is that right? The 63.
Is it right or not? It's an easy question. Yes or no?
Well, I'm not really comprehending, to be honest, because I think the point is very simple.
My God.
It's based off the maths, fundamentally. And if you do the maths, what you'll work out is that 2% of the UK's 12 million children are actually in dire need of help, and that this government has spent 63 million pounds and put it directly towards those 2%, rather than 200 or so million pounds and put it towards 93% of the UK's population, 91% of which don't need that money.
But you can't judge whether people need that money or not, because parents are struggling. Parents don't have jobs right now. It depends of the effectiveness of the new financial package as well. But it's not just disadvantaged children that also may be facing poverty and hunger. It's not just the statistics of it, because there's new statistics of it that haven't been calculated yet, of the millions of children that have lost parents' salaries and lost the right to eat.
Exactly. I mean, let's end it there. That got quite heated at the end, but another great episode. So thanks for everyone for being here. Thank you for listening. This has been Politics Relaxed podcast. We'll see you later.